Bush to you. I'm first question I'm going to direct to President Macarro first. What are your thoughts on the fiscal year 25 rescissions, also known as clawbacks and holdbacks, as well as the fiscal year 26 budget? Concerns about a shutdown or CR versus full year funding. What are your concerns?
Things that keep me up at night. The rescissions, holdbacks, clawbacks. On the one hand, they're part of the budget process, and it's painful to hear and see in writing, and you see all these draft documents that some things are preserved, things are cut. I try to keep perspective. You're asking what are my thoughts? I try to remember to keep perspective on these things because there are phases to these things. So there's the initial proposal, president, and then it goes through OMB. So we go from skinny to skinnier, bare bones, and then we go to Congress, and then they get to have their say. And so to some degree, I still have faith in the process, and encourage that our representatives in both houses are doing the work to be faithful to the trust responsibility of the United States tribes and do what they can, all they can, to restore proposals that cut, especially in the extreme. So, or wrongfully, and cuts that have been made without consultation. So, but it's a process, and along the way, it looks and sounds painful. And so I try to not stay in that moment and realize that, this is a process of months for each of these fiscal years. And so now the disagreements that result in a continuing resolution, as I said in my opening remarks, the present is accounted for, the present moment, but it just the cloud of uncertainty that's introduced by every CR is not a good thing for Indian country. It's not a good thing for our people, for our communities, and even for Congress itself. Every continuing resolution process introduces a new battleground or a new arena for political battles to take place. And once that goes away, well, that arena goes away. And we get back to the business of an actual budget. And so and I really hope that we don't have a CR. I know they're used as threats, and sometimes the CRs are weaponized. Hopefully not. And so I think in the end, a CR doesn't help anybody inside of Indian country or outside of Indian country. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm going to direct the same question to the Indian Gaming Association. And Chairman Stevens, you brought your right-hand man, Jason Giles, today, and he wants to join in answering the question. The clawbacks, the rescissions have been very, very impactful on Indian country. You're looking at some serious $506 million in solar panels. Tribes have spent tens of millions of dollars getting ready to do this, and the money's been held back. What from the Indian Gaming Association? What have your observations been, and what are your thoughts?
I'm gonna let Jason take you through this. I want to say one thing real quickly. When this first hit, before Congress or the Senate came back, me and my team, we start working the Hill right away. And they say, well, there's nobody there. We're there, and there's staffers there. We pounded on the doors and said, hey, we're governments. What's happening around us right now, we're not comfortable with it. We're not familiar with this, and we're here to help. That's what we did. And one of the most important memories of my life was I walk. At nighttime, I walk to the monument, and I say my prayers, and I go home. That's how I end my day. I missed my walk. So then I just did a quick walk in the morning. I walked the Capitol. And on that Capitol, 3 batches of tribal college representatives who were being hit immediately by these changes in the new administration They had tribal professors, tribal administrators, students, and tribal leaders together. 3, maybe 4 batches I ran into on that walk. That gave me relief. That told me that we're here to do this. And then what you hear in the words from these amazing and hardworking leaders, that's what we're doing. And again, we don't have time for partisanship because we're counting on everybody to take care of us. So if Jason can tell you a little bit more about the functions that we deal with, but we hit the hill and we've been there ever since. And again, it's the tribal leader's voice that lead the way.
Jason, if you keep it brief, I don't want to get to Chief Hoskin, but Jason, go ahead.
Just briefly, precisions, clawbacks, impoundment, those are arguments that Congress needs to take up and defend their power of the purse. And those are arguments that will get played out in court and hopefully be resolved by the Supreme Court. The immediacy for our organization, NCAI, NIHB, all our sister tribal organizations, as Chairman Stevens just said, we hit the hill and we hit DC, and we need to reach out, and we have been reaching out to RFK Jr., to Governor Burgum, and explaining to them that when you claw back this money, you're costing lives. And there has been some positive feedback from HHS and RFK Jr. We need to make that same argument with Governor Burgum. All the tribes in his state endorsed him for secretary. And when we get on the ground and talk to these folks and show them that these federal dollars, it's not waste, fraud, or abuse. It's not DEI. These are saving lives. And tribes have been fighting for this money since we signed the first treaty. We did deliver on the treaties in the 18th century, 19th century, 20th century. As Chief Hoskin pointed out, we can go down the list and pick presidents who were good and bad for Indian country. But for the most part, for the last 50 to 60 years, we've been making real progress in advocating on Capitol Hill. Every president has played a role. President Trump, President Obama, President Bush, they've all been good in their own way. And we're trying to carry that on and explain to them that this is federal dollars that are essential government services. So we're going to keep taking that message right to DC and right to our partners. And you find that they're very understanding. And when you can show them that if you're a tribe that's off the electrical grid, wind projects and solar projects are good for you. And that's what we need to keep taking.
Thank you. Okay, Chief Hoskin, before you became principal chief, I heard you make a speech out in Tulsa, Oklahoma that I was so impressed with. You made mention, you said that not all tribes are as prosperous as the Cherokee Nation, and that you have to look out for your little brother, so to speak. And I was really impressed with that. You just mentioned like $26 million that called back and possibility of another $20 million. What do you say to the administration or even members of Congress, knowing that the tribes that may not be as prosperous as the Cherokee Nation are really hurting? What would you say?
Well, what I say is that although the Cherokee Nation may be able to absorb some of these cuts or may be able to stem some of the misery that occasions these cuts, because we're talking about healthcare, and anybody who runs a tribal healthcare system knows there's not a lot of fat, no fat in these healthcare systems. This is providers, this is medicine, these are square footage of facilities to deliver healthcare to people that need it. And while we may be able to absorb some of the damage done by cuts, there are tribes for which this is absolutely consequential in terms of stopping services. And that worries me, and I don't worry any member of Congress. I worry any member of any federal administration. I mean, here's what we know. The next time the United States fully funds its trust responsibilities will be the first time it's ever done it. Mm-hmm. Budgets ebb and flow. We know that. But governing by rescission, governing by clawback, okay, governing by continuing resolution is not just about damaging cuts. And this is echoing what the gentlemen have said. It's about the instability, the inability to plan, the being frozen in place. I mean, I'm the chief of the Cherokee Nation. We've got other tribal leaders here. If I managed affairs like this, my council would let me know about it. The departments would let me know about it. And the Cherokee people would let me know about it, as they should. If I pulled the rug out from under departments that had been funded, I don't know that I should hold this office if I continue to do that. That's how Washington, D.C. has been running. And so it concerns me. But to your question, the tribes that have the least margin in terms of maybe additional revenue, and we're blessed at the Cherokee Nation in terms of the revenue that we have, that can be a hedge against some of this dysfunction out of Washington, D.C. They don't have it, and we let leaders know of that this is damaging the parts of Indian country that have taken it on the chin too long, and they don't deserve what's happening. Now, that rosy assessment aside, this has been a great week for having those conversations. I can tell you, I spoke with the new Treasurer of the United States, Treasurer Beach. He's not the decider on all of these things, but the man listened. We talked to him about clawbacks, and he listened. We talked to him about economic development in parts of the United States and Indian country that hadn't seen a lick of economic development in many, many generations. And the man listened. And I think that's the power of this week, is that we can focus our efforts on people like new members of the administration. And I'll tell you, and some folks in this room were there, that man listened. And he gave us good feedback. And so that gives me some degree of optimism that when we send a message to these leaders that these dysfunctional actions, clawbacks, rescissions, continuing resolutions are hurting people, and there's nowhere else to turn if we don't solve this dysfunction. I think we've got some eyes open and some ears listening this week.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And let's move on to the next question, but I'm going to ask you gentlemen to keep your answers to maybe 2 minutes each. I know it's hard in Indian country, but let's see what we can do. What's the most powerful takeaway from this week we should build on? I'll start with you, President Macarro.
I think for me that there were two. I'll say in short, every member of Congress, both House and Senate, that we met with this week, distilling down all their comments, they had a common denominator in their message in what they said to us, and that is, we need you to be here. You being here helps us, and that was, I was heartened to hear that. Democrat, Republican, it was just really good to hear. So that was one takeaway that I feel empowered by to continue doing what we're doing, that we're on the right track, and we need more of what we're doing. And then the other thing was actually the hearing yesterday at SCIA, the Senate Committee on Indian Affairs. It was on the 50th anniversary of the Indian Self-Determination and Education Assistance Act, and ISDIA. In fact, Senator Murkowski took a moment at the beginning to correct everybody's pronunciation of the acronym. So it's ISDIA, she said. So nobody make that mistake anymore. There's only one way to say it, right? And I in all seriousness, I find that helpful. But the point of mentioning the Senate Committee on Indian Affairs is it was I think a strong display of bipartisanship between the chair, Senator Murkowski, and ranking leader, Senator Schatz, and they both said that they were there to represent bipartisanship for Indian country, and that they would continue to do so. And then we heard from their committee staff today, at least 6 of them, and they echoed the same sentiments. So I find that encouraging too, because you're not in DC and all you see or hear is what you see either on social media or in newspapers or on TV. It's a whole different dynamic. It's very caustic, and there's a lot of rhetoric flying above our heads. And but to be here and hear that on something that affects our daily lives, it's such as the Senate Committee on Indian Affairs, I found that very stabilizing and encouraging. Thank you.
You would.
Yeah, I'll just say this. I think some of the most powerful influence that we have is the leadership that are here. Unity Days, they don't call it that for just by an accident. Indian country built this presence here in Washington, D.C. And some, probably the biggest reward for me is I sit with, but next to two of the most dynamic leaders in the whole world right now. And these guys aren't dynamic because of who they are. They're dynamic because the responsibility on their shoulders and how they handle it and how they project it to the halls of Congress. That's what makes them dynamic. Mr. Fine Day and Leonard Forsman down here. These are leaders, and these guys are knocking down doors. I met the chair lady from the Ponca tribe of Nebraska today. This is what makes us who we are today, and this is how we make a difference. So, I hate to say that I'm not worried about all this stuff because I am, but I'm confident that we're going to knock these doors down and teach people about who we are and make this better for Native America. So I'm not. I'm worried and I'm concerned, but I'm confident because of leaders like these that are here educating the world around us.
Thank you. And I'm going to move to Chief Hoskin. What's your biggest takeaways, Chief?
Yeah, my biggest takeaway, really two things. One is this week reminded us the friends that we have, and we got to sort of renew friendships, but we made new friends. And some of those new friends are in very important positions in this new administration. And I feel like we made new friends this week. The second thing is echoing the president. The Senate Committee on Indian Affairs looking at, I don't pronounce it right, ISDIA. That's what she said. What is important. I had the opportunity to testify, among others, about that. And I shared this with Senator Murkowski afterwards. I thanked her for her work. I said, I wish every American could watch that hearing, not because I was there, but because of two things. One is that gives people a window into what works in Indian country and why we need to expand it. Self-determination, taking power out of Washington, D.C., and returning it. That's important. It's not giving it to the tribes. It's returning it to the tribes. Returning it to the tribes produces better results every single time. We don't have to guess about it. All we have to do is go look at it. And we showed that. So it gives a window to that. The other thing is that committee operated on a bipartisan basis. It is a breath of fresh air. Any American who watched that would have seen the ranking member, Senator Schatz, and the chairman, Senator Murkowski, working hand in hand. They may not agree on a lot of other policy areas, but when it comes to Indian country, they both agree that the country ought to do better. And how do we get there is through the kind of constructive dialogue we had at that committee. That, among other things, this is a great week, President, but that was a great moment for me as a tribal leader. And I just wish more Americans could see how this Congress at its best can work on Indian country issues.
Yeah, one thing I will just ad lib that Senator Murkowski and Senator Schatz, they've been doing this so long, they really get it. And I'm happy to hear you said you were able to make new friends. They, Ernie said earlier, constantly educating people. Moving on to the next question, what concrete commitments did you secure this week? Names, amounts, timelines for fiscal year 2026 appropriations to Indian country. You want to answer that one first, Jason?
Well, say again, Levi, real quick. I'll let Chairman start us off, but go ahead.
Okay. What concrete commitments did you secure this week from administration or members of Congress? Amounts of money, timelines for the fiscal year 2026 appropriation to Indian country.
I'll let Jason give you some of the fine tuning voice, but
Okay.
the things that we have is their assurance that they can hear us. Their assurance to us that our message from the tribal leadership, from our communities, that they hear us and are going to do their best to create an educational atmosphere so that people understand where we're coming from, understand our voice, and they take us serious. We came into this thing early, and that's why we took it head on. That's why we went knocking on doors when we knew nobody was there, because we have to do what we have to do to get them to understand. And I think we're objective because they can hear us. And I think that's the assurances that we felt in the folks that met with us during the Unity Week, is that they're assuring us that they can hear us and they're willing to listen and they're opening their doors to us. I think that's the accomplishment that is very successful for us, and that Native America knows that we're walking through those doors. I think that's an important part about it.
And Levi, at IGA, we pushed back on having Unity Days this early in the fall. We thought it might be more appropriate around Columbus Day holiday, which they're trying to make great again. and send a message there. But actually, this was the week to do it because of the looming shutdown. And what we found out in Congress this week, a lot of optimism in terms of, we got messages from Sharice Davids, hey, we're working together behind the scenes. We got messages from Lisa Murkowski, we're working together in a bipartisan fashion. We have a lot of friends, and they all told us pretty much the same thing, that there is a lot of bipartisan cooperation going on behind the scenes. Now, how do they get there by October 1st? That's the big question. But there's optimism that they can work out some agreements, and Democrats can get some of what they want, and Republicans can help keep the government open. Because what we know is, and Chief Hoskin will tell you, tribes suffer first when there's government shutdown. We rely so much on our federal partners for so much support. When the park rangers go home, that leaves us exposed. When Corps of Engineer guys disappear, it leaves us exposed. But there's optimism that they're working together, and at a minimum, that Indian country will be heard and our needs will be respected.
Chief Hoskin, what's your?
I got a commitment for full funding for everything, but they wanted to be anonymous. They didn't. That's not true. And the question, Levi, is a good one, and it's a natural one, and it's one that everyday people would ask, but it is not and cannot be the measure of whether this week was successful or not, because we're not generally going to get that kind of commitment. But I think what we got a commitment was to listen and to learn, to expose the success of Indian country to people like the Treasurer of the United States, members of the Senate Committee on Indian Affairs, and other members of Congress and agency heads, and to drive home the dysfunction of this federal government is hitting Indian country the hardest. And when we're talking about dollars being clawed back, it's really clawing back healthcare, and we're talking about proposed budgets that zero out things like LIHEAP and Job Corps. It's hurting people that we care about, that we're committed to serving. We were heard this week, and that is, I think, part of the win. And you don't measure a win in a single week, and you don't measure a loss by not getting a commitment to fully fund everything. But I think I've been around long enough to know what's a win and what's a loss in this business. And this week was a win for the reasons that these gentlemen have said and that I've added to.
President Macarro, what's your big? What kind of commitments did you hear about this week?
Yeah, commitments. Just leave the word concrete out. I mean, it's politics.
Oh, you want to take the concrete out? Okay.
But we heard, and I want to make sure I get this correct. We heard about a pending reintroduction of the boarding school truth and healing legislation. Okay, that almost made it to the finish line in the last Congress. It's being reintroduced, I believe, with the same language, and there's bipartisan support for that. Heard about reauthorization of HAZA, tribal housing. So that, and even when the HAZA starts to move, there's a call from leadership in Congress that they're going to need our help to help support it, push it once again, in particular with Nahazda. And that's really significant. Nahazda has not been reauthorized in, I don't know, over a decade. So, and then there's a pending reauthorization. Wow. So it hasn't happened yet, but it's being teed up right now. And I think there was one more I had.
What about advance appropriations? Anyone you can answer that. Is that?
Well, let me do this. Chief Hoskin mentioned earlier
For healthcare, for health.
Well, I want to. This is important. You mentioned the treasurer.
Mm-hmm.
There's several policy items that are in front of Treasury. One is an express statement from the treasurer that he will continue to support and does support the Treasury Technical Advisory Committee, the TTAC.
Sure.
Okay, and they're finalizing amendments to regulations on GWE and what's the other thing? Tribal entities. And that the finalization of those regs would be announced by the end of the year. There's a commitment on that. So that's significant. And I think there was one more thing out of the treasury, but those are big. That's huge. So these things have been hanging out there actually for years. And there's a lot of progress made in the last year last Congress and this administration in particular, the treasurer has picked this up and is bringing these to fruition. So, okay, do you have another question?
I just, yeah, there's been some concern because it took decades to get advanced appropriations for healthcare. And it's not in the current fiscal year 2026 budget as submitted by the president. What's the feel on Capitol Hill? I said, are they going to keep that in place?
Jump in. Yeah, part of our conversation with them, unsolicited even, if I met with the treasurer, the understanding the importance of advanced appropriations and what that means for Indian country, especially with healthcare. But we've also been, and we know that was a 10-year process just to get that approved.
Sure.
But we also know that the same is true to have advanced appropriations for BIA funding.
Mm-hmm.
And the conversations we've had, they've expressed that on both sides of the aisle. And so I think that's another potential one that they do understand the importance of that. And moving forward, that will be part of the conversation.
Thank you, Midwich. What moments of bipartisan collaboration stood out and what shared priorities emerged?
I'll refer to my previous statement about the Senate Committee on Indian Affairs.
And some of these questions may be
Yeah.
overlapping with some answers. So,
Yeah, not only watching and seeing the mutual collaboration between the two committee leaders, the chair and the ranking, but on the actual policy, in particular, that they were discussing ISDIA, and Chief Hoskin was a panelist. There was a bit of a grilling, a mutual grilling. The representative from IHS, is the IHS director, as well as the Bureau of Indian Affairs representative. And in fact, they were directed, they had homework and they had to provide some answers to things they couldn't answer during that hearing. So, and that was bipartisan. It wasn't a partisan attack. It was an overt support of tribal sovereignty in Indian country that they were falling short on during that hearing. So that was, we need more of that.
you have anything there, Chief Hoskin?
Just briefly, the Senate Committee on Indian Affairs, which the President just spoke about, when you have Senator Mark Wayne Mullins speaking to some of the great success, self-determination in the Cherokee Nation with specific examples, and then you see Senator Brian Schatz saying something similar, and then you see on a bipartisan basis, it wasn't softball, but it wasn't for performance. It was a substantive grilling of agency heads, a substantive questioning, I would say. And I think on that basis, we say that was the sort of bipartisanship we need across members of the Senate who may disagree strenuously on a great many other things, but they clearly, based on their own words, have a consensus on the country needs to do better for Indian country. And that's really something that I think we should celebrate.
I think one of the one of the things that's important to us, whether it's my tribe, 17,000 members, Chief Hoskin's tribe has a few more members than our tribe. But what he talked about is those smaller tribes that don't have those kind of resources, and then that's who we're really fighting for. But even in my world, I value. I can go to my health care. I'm 66 years old, and I have to go there to take care of my dental. I got 2 hearing aids. I'm an old guy. We need those kind of services, and any little bit that a lot of folks. I'm getting ready to apply for Social Security. I cannot provide the need that I have on Social Security. So it's up to the tribes to get here to DC to fight this fight, and it can't afford to be about partisanship. We're working with Tom Cole in Oklahoma or Betty McCollin up in Minnesota. These people care about Native America, and they're not walking the party line on it. That we need those folks to support us, especially those small tribes that need us. And like I said, I said before, my father, he passed away in the state-of-the-art health facility. His mother passed away before him in the same facility. His mother, who went to 5 boarding schools, suffered abuse and struggle, but yet she worked her way through. And his mother, who broke barriers, who wrote a dictionary in her 80s and helped to digitize that dictionary when she was almost 100. Those are examples of victories of what we all fight for. And that's what we're here for. We're here to do what they taught us to do. And right now, we have to fight for our communities, for our health care, and for our needs, direct needs to Indian countries. That's what we're here for. And that's why I say the responsibility that we incurred and the fight that we fought this week is amazing. And that's why I'm honored to stand before with not just the tribal leaders. Again, you have some of the most powerful tribal leaders in Indian history walking this hill today, walking yesterday, and their teams that walk with them. It makes the world go round. We can't do this. We can't change America without these elected tribal officials that come from right from the heart of the Indian country. We're winning because of that.
Well, we have about 4 minutes left. So what I want to do is ask the panelists if there's last remarks you want to make. I do have one more question, but if you don't, I'd rather defer to your last remarks you want to
The
make.
only thing I'll say is again, thanks to the National Congress of American Indians, thanks to President Macarro, and I think this has been a great week, and the work doesn't end this week. It's just, I think, magnified this group.
You know, from my standpoint, I'll come back to Grandma. You know, she's gone for about 12 years. She lived to 103, and an example. You have to work with me on this on Levi. This is a little deep for you.
Okay.
So this non-Indian grocer in the reservation community kept telling my grandma's grandma to keep going to the city to get her husband's annuity or whatever he got. My grandma, she told me of her grandfather fought in the Civil War, and that non-Indian couple kept getting them to the city and helping them, and they eventually got that annuity or whatever they got for him fighting on behalf of the United States of America, and that helped them to be able to survive because they had little and nothing in that era. So sometimes there's a neighbor, sometimes there's a friend. I told you about 700,000 employees in this industry in Indian gaming. Half of those are non-Indians. So we're not adopting anybody, but those folks are a part of the Indian gaming family, and together we walk. And this economy thrives because of tribal government gaming and because of the jobs Indian country creates as a whole. And we just got to keep doing that, keep working together, and keep utilizing what we have. And again, our energy extends well beyond the reservation boundary because we're all in this together.
And I'm going to let President Macarro have the last word.
So, thank you, Levi. 1944 National Congress of American Indians is founded. Today is the largest, the oldest, most representative tribal organization in the United States in Indian country, and I think together with something that's a new wrinkle for us this year is the creation of, which started out of all the chaos at the beginning of this year, is the creation of the Coalition for Tribal Sovereignty, which is the unification, I suppose, of all the individual subject matter Native organizations in the country, from housing to finance to elders and education and on and on. So that because necessity was the mother of invention, the Tribal Sovereignty Coalition was brought together so that we could focus a mission. And that is why NCAI was created. That's why we exist. And I think we doubled down on our existence, on why we are here. And we were able to do this because we're not an advocacy organization that exists with a few lobbyists that hit the hill on behalf of the org. We are a collection of tribal nations and tribal leaders. And what we do, what breathes life into what we do is all of these leaders that come together for this advocacy. And we accomplished that this week. So very proud of that, and we'll continue. Thank you.
And Chief McGuish to all the panelists and to the press that's in the room, and tribal leaders, Chief McGuish for coming in, showing that you care. And to those viewers who tuned in and online and stream, Chief McGuish, we're all in this together and we're trying to work for the better of Indian country. Thank you very much, NCAI.
Thank you, everybody.
Take care.